A lot of my friends who are in different status, given that some of them have government bond that they need to fulfill, some of them have started preparing for USMLE step 1, and some of them have not. They are only contemplating whether or not they should start. There are various variables that come into play. Some of them are starting 2022. USMLE step 1 is going to be pass-fail, and depending on whether or not basic science is their strength versus weakness, should they start preparing for USMLE step 1 now? So they take USMLE step 1 while it is still a scoreable exam, given that IMGs in terms of application process, one of the very big important pillar is our scores. Those are sort of the variables that my friends give me, and then they ask for advice whether or not to start now versus start later, give step 1 first versus step 2 first, and how to go about preparing for each of those. I most of the time end up answering very similarly. So what I thought was, why not record a video about it, and then I can just refer them to the video, and also a lot of other people in internet can gain some insight from my experience for whatever that is worth. One of my friend who is doing his government bond right now, sort of need one more year to complete his government bond, asked me what he should do in regards of preparing for USMLE step. This is my advice for him. I think given that 2022 is going to be pass-fail for USMLE step 1, and you'd want to optimize your strength, you'd want to play your strength, and I think his strength is clinicals, not only because he was better at clinicals when he was at med school with me, but also because he has been dealing with day-to-day patient care for a year already. I think that he is better at clinicals, so I advised him that he should start preparing for USMLE step 2. You'd have to deal with hospital patients currently, and sort of preparing for USMLE step 2 will help him more. He can read around his patient and still prepare for USMLE step 2. For step 1, it is still not very feasible or practical, because a lot of things that we will learn for USMLE step 1 would pertain to basic science knowledge more than clinical knowledge, just because of the nature of questions that's asked for USMLE step 1. The natural question then would become, how can I prepare for USMLE step 2? The one-word answer is UWorld. I would suggest that you start by doing some questions each day. Even 5 or 10 questions per day would be enough. Anyone who starts preparing for USMLE step 1, after a month or 2, if they approach me, they would inevitably complain of not being able to study consistently. And this is the advice, or this is sort of the suggestion that I give everyone. You cannot assume that you would decide to study from tomorrow and get going. That does not happen. Sitting down to study, and studying is a cognitive process. It takes time and effort to develop the habit of studying, so you'd have to take that into consideration. The fact that you have 9 months or a year can be played to advantage for you, because you can give some of that time, like a month or 2, to set up a daily routine that you'd inevitably not achieve initially. Initially, when you start doing UWorld, you'll of course not hit a big target. You'd not do 20 questions or 25 questions per day. That does not happen. If you do, then chances are that you are compromising on quality, and I would never suggest that. What I suggest is taking into account that the habit of studying is a cognitive process in itself, and then it takes some time to practice. Today, for example, if you can sit down and study for 25 minutes straight without feeling very bored or feeling like this is it, I cannot do anything more than this, then tomorrow you can do 30 minutes, day after tomorrow 35 maybe. So it takes time. It'll happen gradually. People seem to ignore the fact that studying, or the habit of studying, is a cognitive process, and they seem to think of it as you decide that you are going to study from tomorrow, and then from tomorrow miraculously something would change and then you'd start studying. That usually does not happen, and then sometimes people get frustrated around it, and then they sometimes lose track of what's going on. They worry about it a lot, but then that's not something you'd want to worry about. Be productive each day, a little more productive each day. The other aspects of studying for either step 1 or step 2, and I think this applies to both, is curating your thought process rather than learning facts from a question bank. I read a blog which read, if you are practicing for musical instrument competition, and for example, if you are to play a guitar in that competition, it does not make sense for you to start practicing piano. Although a lot of musical notes are similar, and if you theoretically know piano very well, then you'd know a lot of aspects of like how you're supposed to play guitar. To me, and I hope to you as well, it only makes sense if you like start practicing guitar, because that's what you're going to play in the competition after all. So it's the same. If you start giving exams from day one of your preparation, you'll prepare yourself for giving good exams. So you not have to use a lot of resources, because there are a lot of resources. There is Sketchy Medical, which covers pediatrics and surgery and internal medicine and whatnot. There's also Boards and Beyond Step 2. There is Amboss Question Bank. There is Kaplan Question Bank, and there are other video resources. But then what I suggest is, if you feel anxious that you're not using all of these resources, just tell yourself that you'd use all of this after you're done with your UWorld. But then by the time you're done with your UWorld, you'd realize that you are pretty much like ready for your exam. Although an entirely different discussion, I can tell you that like you'd know that objectively after giving UWorld self-assessments and NBMEs. You'd want milestones in between your preparation, and you want to objectively sort of know where you are in terms of where you are in terms of your preparation, what is your direction, what is your pace, and where do you want to reach, how far is the goal, and those things. Of course, take care of your mental health and take care of your physical health while doing that, because you have a long way to go. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. That's the most cliched and most important advice that flows around. Once you reach to a time where you can do like 2 blocks very easily and revise them and then feel like you have done a very quality job today, then that's the time I would want you to add one more question bank if you can. Like if you are aiming for 260s or 250 plus, then you'd want to add one more question bank. I'd suggest Amboss. If you add Amboss question bank to that, then you'd sort of like see some of the curved balls, you'd see some questions that are made unnecessarily difficult, but then it will give you sort of a way of looking at the same concept in very different ways, and that's what you'd want to keep in your toolbox on the day of your exam. After your bond is done, after your government bond is done, you'd give USMLE Step 2, because only then you'd be able to like prepare your paperwork and then go give your exam. So once you give your USMLE Step 2, you'd want to give USMLE Step 1. For USMLE Step 1, what you do is use First Aid, Boards and Beyonds, Pathoma, UWorld Question Bank. Like I say Boards and Beyonds and Pathoma because first 3 chapters of Pathoma, although they are also covered in Boards and Beyonds, and I would want you to skim through them, but I would want you to do flashcards from first 3 chapters of Pathoma. I want you to like mug it up very, 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 very well. In terms of doing UWorld for Step 1, it's the same process, but then you'd want to do it much faster, because for you, you'd already be past 2022 and you'd want to just pass USMLE Step 1 exam, and you'd not care about scores. And because you'd have prepared for USMLE Step 2, sort of like 30-35% of preparation for your USMLE Step 1 is done. You can arrive at a lot of basic science questions just because you know clinical sciences, and you know that this drug versus this drug is always prescribed. So this drug, although I don't know the mechanism precisely, has to be the right answer. For your first aid, you'd use syllabus. What you do is like whatever is in first aid is the most important, the highest yield of content. I'd still want you to annotate first aid. I'd want you to add things that help you understand what already is there in first aid. That way, when you revise it for your last revision, you'd not have to go anywhere to understand like a curve that is shown or an arrow that points from one enzyme to another, and you'd not understand like why is this arrow pointing this direction or so forth. If you would struggle with any of that, you'd already have annotated that in first aid, and that would help you save time. That's the only reason I would annotate a first aid, not to add more facts to it, because that does not make sense. First aid is a book that tells you like these are the high yield content. Why would you like add to it and then dilute, so to speak, your highest of yield content? I think practically 3 or 4 months should be enough for Step 1 once it becomes pass or fail exam, because you do not care much about your score. Once you are done with that, what I would want you to do is I'd want you to like research Observership. I'd want you to do that after you're done with step 1. While preparing for your English test. If it's OET, then it's really easy. You just have to prepare history taking and talking to a patient and listening and writing like referral letters and stuff. And I can have a different video about it if need be. When I say research observerships, what I mean is go to forums, USMLE forums, and ask people if they know where you can get observership, if they know the emails of doctors that are generous enough to offer you observerships. And there are also consultancies, like I wish it was different, but then the fact of the matter is easiest way to get observership is to pay for it. If you pay for observership, then it's like very easy. You'd not have to stress about it. That's one way of doing observership. The other way is like emailing doctors and then requesting them, and then once you're done with your English test, you'd start preparing for your USMLE Step 3. And yes, I would want you to give USMLE Step 3 before you apply for your match. A couple of reasons, because one, you are an IMG. If you have done your USMLE Step 3, your application would obviously be stronger and you'd have something to speak about during your interviews. 2, how else would you come to US to do observerships? Like tele-rotations can be done, but then they are not as valued as real hands-on observerships, or electives. So that's one way you can come to US, get B1, B2 visa and come to US, and then do your observerships before you apply. I hope that's one scenario that plays out well for you. I don't know if I've missed anything, something is not very clear, then comment below and then I try and reply that, or if need be I can make another video. So I think that's it for today. I'll see you in the next one. Take care, keep preparing. Bye bye.